Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It is Hugh Hewitt. Good morning to you on this Monday. I am very, very pleased to be with you. I'm back in town. Went away for the weekend. Drove my 4 hours. Saw my daughter in the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and came back. And so my back is whacked, but nevertheless, happy to be here. Let me give you the rundown. The rundown on this Monday is the coronavirus is back in China. Half of Beijing districts report new coronavirus cases. 79 people hospitalized, 36 new infections in the Chinese capital city. And given the fact that it's an authoritarian dictatorship, they've locked it down. We don't do that. We encourage people to stay home. They just weld doors shut, and everything is vacant in Beijing again. We'll keep you posted. But that has had an impact on financial markets as stocks sink after the jump in China and in U.S. had some spikes in various places, but not the hospitalizations that China reports. So I want to do the international market check. I never do American markets in the morning because who knows where they're going to be in the afternoon. But let me see what is going on abroad. This is brought to you by Birch Gold. Go to hughgold.com, hughgold.com, or text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Gold is holding steady at $1,718 an ounce, $1,718. Originally, I told you to buy and diversify into gold when it was at $1,400. It's been above $1,700 now. I think unbroken for the last 2 months. If the inflation I expect in the near term, I don't mean 3 or 4 years down the road, I mean within the year, gold will continue to advance. But even if it doesn't, even if it goes back to $1,400, it's the part of your portfolio that is always indestructible. So please go to hughgold.com and have Birch Gold send you the material on rolling over a portion of your IRA, 10, 15, 20%. Buying some gold for your safety deposit box. Always have some gold in your mix. Like real estate, it's like stocks, it's like bonds. Fully diversified portfolio. Precious metals should be a part of that. And the place to do that is Birch Gold at hughgold.com. When we looked on Friday, it was a good day for everybody. The Dow was up 477 points. The NASDAQ was up 96. The S&P was up 39. But abroad today, Japan closed down almost 3.5%. Again, the return of coronavirus to China means that even though the West is disentangling itself from the PRC at a rapid fashion under President Trump's leadership, we're still intertwined. Production is still there. It's moving to India. It's moving to Vietnam, but it's still deeply in China. In England, late in the day, the stocks are down 1%. Even later in the day in Germany, they're down 1%. Not terrible, not a rout. It's a concern. I believe this is going to be the last day of the concern as they factor in, okay, maybe there'll be a second wave in the summer and maybe in the United States. But as the Wall Street Journal notes, there's also in China a second economic story. Chinese consumers are adding to the factory-led economic recovery. So Chinese consumers were locked down for 3 or 4 months. They are out and buying, or at least they were outside of Beijing this weekend, and that's beginning to percolate through, much like the turn to Amazon and Costco and Target and the other direct-to-delivery, direct-to-home. By the way, I had dinner out last night back in Northern Virginia with a senior Trump administration official. And we think the summer, and we dine socially distanced outdoors. Most of Virginia is now eating outside, but the restaurants are doing well, and they're expanding menus slowly, and they're bringing back wait staff slowly, so that's very good. Did the same thing on Saturday afternoon with the family down south in Virginia, and the Wall Street Journal's op-ed page says, new rules for COVID summer. Be flexible and vigilant. America is entering a complicated new phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, writes the Journal. The remainder of 2020 warrants flexibility and tolerance, trying different ways to adapt to new evidence. In a country with such fractured politics, this will be no small challenge. Part of my conversation with our senior unnamed Trump administration official was, how do we rebuild the credibility of the public health people? In every state, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, how do we rebuild credibility when they were absent And I understand why they were absent. I'm not critical of them. No one could speak in the face of the giant demonstrations following the murder of George Floyd. And that may be impossible to reintroduce them this week because now there is the killing of a man in Atlanta, 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks. Notice I say murder of George Floyd because I've reached my conclusion on George Floyd. He was murdered. I don't know enough about Mr. Brooks, although it looks bad for the Atlanta police, and I'm glad that the Atlanta police chief stepped down. You heard me say on this show last week, when a controversial killing of a civilian by police occurs, whether that civilian is white or black or Latino or Native American or checkerboard, the police chief in that town ought to immediately step down if it appears to be an unwarranted use of lethal force. Accountability goes to the chief. If the chief can't set it up the right way. I also believe that there ought to be maybe a federal law requiring the immediate disestablishment of a police union in any city in which such a civil rights violation occurs. One thing I would like to hear African-American leaders address, I'm going to talk to Ben Carson about this later today, is the fact that the two greatest impediments to reform in their community are police unions and teachers' unions. And by far the worst is teachers' unions. Police, law enforcement officers out there listening to me, I love you people, and you will always have me to protect you against false charges. But I haven't heard of one of you defend the officers involved in the murder of Floyd. I don't know much about the Atlanta situation yet. I've read the story. I've watched the video, some of it off screen. I do not know how close the individual was, Mr. Brooks, when he turned with the taser. I don't know if a taser is lethal force. I don't think that's justified, but I'm going to wait and see. But it's a DUI, and he ran away. How could you shoot the guy? So I think we have a second police killing unjustified, but not brutal like George Floyd, deadly like George Floyd, but not 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'm going to play for you, by the way. I want you to be prepared. I'm going to play for you a lot of the Reverend Al Sharpton's eulogy of George Floyd. I listened to it twice this weekend, and there's a lot of it I do not like. He attacks President Trump. I don't like it, but there's a lot of it you ought to hear because I don't think you ever hear anything like this. And I didn't know Reverend Al Sharpton could actually preach this way. It's fairly comprehensive and not a little inspiring. And I want to play it for you before Ben Carson because this show talks about what people need to hear. And you need to hear the perspective of the black community articulately expressed through the Reverend Al. You may not like Al. I like Al. A lot of you don't like Al. Larry Elder doesn't like Al. I think Al has changed over the course of the 30 years I've known him into a responsible critic, though we don't agree on anything. I enjoy being on his show. And I want you to hear that. But this Atlanta shooting has sparked new outrage. That is the key rundown story of the day. I don't know if people have the energy to do it all again. I don't know. The Washington Post, killing of black man in Atlanta puts spotlight anew on police as prosecutors contemplate charges against officers. I'll wait for the prosecutors on that. Then, from the New York Times, police killings prompt reassessment of laws allowing deadly force. And that might be appropriate. I don't know. I believe police reform is pretty far advanced in most places in the United States. But as you will hear Al Sharpton say in hour two, how do these people get into the force in the first place? What about qualified immunity? That's a court-created doctrine, by the way, that my friend Clark Neely thinks is terrible. I'm not an expert in it. And police unions protecting everyone, like teachers' unions protecting the worst teachers. Why do we have them? Where did they come from? Why do we not get rid of them? Police unions and teacher unions are the worst things to happen to American public policy, and especially the inner cities in the last 100 years. Police unions and teachers unions do a lot of good things, but they always end up protecting the worst of the worst because of their union approach. And that's not good for anyone. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Job Creators Network Foundation.